Hi, I'm just going to share this video from Richard Wolff, who is absolutely fantastic. Democracy at Work. And in this discussion, they're discussing the police, and he's talking about a dramatic reduction in the police. I mean, I think police are needed. I don't know about dramatically reducing the police, but I do agree wholeheartedly with what he's saying, what this man's saying here, about abolishing prohibition. I think that we should just abolish prohibition. And one of the disturbing things about it that people don't seem to be taking into account, and so I'm just going to add that point here to this brilliant conversation between these two brilliant minds at work here, is the amount of prisoners and even the amount of juveniles that are being incarcerated in America. It is a country with the highest prison population in the world as compared to the national population. It's got the highest numbers percentage-wise in jail at any given time, and that costs a lot of money. And what is even more disgusting about it is that you've got private corporations actually profiting from putting all these people in prison. There's a whole legal system that absolutely fundamentally relies on this huge turnover of people going through the prison system every year, and people's jobs are dependent on it, which is, you are at the Ouroboros level, aren't you, where you've got the snake eating its own tail, till eventually the snake is going to die because it is literally eating itself. And what you're dealing with is a total corruption at the very core of society that is embedded in the legal system itself. So with prohibition, you are going to end up getting corrupt police officers. I mean, I discovered that the average police officer's wage is something like $25,000 a year. I was like, what? $25,000 a year for being a police officer in America? I mean, seriously, can that be true? You know, what? Is it any wonder that police are becoming corrupt? That, they're as much involved in selling and buying drugs, amassing drugs, as the criminals they're catching, and half the times they're in cahoots with the criminals. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. I just don't know how anybody could expect somebody to do that job for really less than 50 grand a year. Okay, every police officer should be on $50,000 a year, at least. It's a serious job. I mean, in Britain, for example, GPs get on average about £90,000 a year. That's a British GP. It's a difficult job. They have to deal with some really difficult people, difficult health issues. It's a huge social sort of responsibility that they're taking on board as well. They're at risk of liability and all kinds of things, and even it's a health risk. There's a high suicide rate among doctors as well. So compared to other professions, so yeah, I don't begrudge them getting 90 grand a year, but at the same time, why aren't police officers getting 90 grand a year? They're just as much facing liability, except not really in America, it seems, and barely at the moment in Britain. The liability levels has dropped. But nonetheless, the accountability, why aren't they getting at least 50 grand a year start pay for every police officer? That would cut the corruption on any level. Getting rid of drugs, getting rid of the drugs laws, prohibition, that's fundamental. That is fundamental to getting rid of crime and criminals, removing their source of profits, removing their source of power over people. Instead, it would cost far less than is presently spent on policing, the legal system, the prison system. Okay, it would cost far less to actually just educate the public, regulate the drugs, make sure that they're safe, sell them through proper licensed venues, like for example how alcohol is sold, you know, and that would vastly reduce the crime and the criminals and even the addicts, because it's been proven that wherever drugs have been legalised, there are less addicts. That's a fact, an unavoidable fact, because illegal drugs, it has an incentive factor, especially to the youth, because it's illegal, because you're not supposed to do it. So, oh, but actually, drugs are really nice. They make you feel good, but you're not supposed to do it. You're not supposed to feel good. Well, why is nature providing all these consciousness-altering substances that humanity has actually used for thousands upon thousands of years? And suddenly, in the 20th century, they're all illegal and dangerous. But meanwhile, the pharmaceutical industry is churning out opioids and all kinds of crap that people are equally addicted to, and alcoholism being the absolute worst. But again, we saw what happened with prohibition against alcohol, so why didn't America learn its lesson then? No, what America learned was a form of social control through crime and criminalising people, especially the poor, and especially people of colour, who by far are actually paying the most in every which way imaginable for prohibition, because there's plenty of rich white people buying the cocaine. It isn't poor people that have got the millions and millions of dollars to put into cocaine. It is the very rich that are buying most drugs and using the most drugs and actually importing the drugs, and then, you know, they'll import it because they've got the money to import it, and then they'll get back 4 times over whatever they've spent on importing their supply. They'll get, you know, 4, 5, 10 times over what they bought it for by dishing it out on the black market through the police force, through the police chosen gangs. Okay, you know, and like I say, when you've got police that are on 25 grand a year or 30 grand a year, I mean, oh my gosh, no, that is despicable. I mean, they're not paid much better in Britain, I have to say. I'm absolutely disgusted what the police are paid, because they do have to deal with some seriously dangerous people, some very difficult situations, you know, like a neighbour of mine a few years ago, a couple of years ago, asked me to go and check on a friend of hers, that an elderly friend, she was an elderly lady, asked me to check on her elderly friend who lived a few miles away, and he was normally very regular at her house on a Sunday. She'd not been able to contact him, she'd not heard from him, he'd not answered his phone, he'd not contacted her. I went to the house. It seemed very clear to me that he died in the house, which I won't go into the details, but, you know, I felt very strongly. We had to phone the police and wait until the police arrived, and they went in the house and they found him dead in his bed. It was a hot summer. He'd been dead in his bed for over 2 weeks. And I saw one of the police officers rush out of the house, bent double in the back garden, and my heart just went out to him and the other police officer that was with him. I just felt so, I just cannot describe, words cannot describe, and it really brought home to me what the police have to deal with. And I know that there's some horror stories about police, and I do share them. and I am disgusted and outraged by them, but at the same time, I can't let that cloud the fact that there are some excellent police out there, and they do a very difficult job, and they get called to deal with all kinds of really unpleasant situations, and therefore they should be paid a super high wage, you know, on the same level as doctors, because in a way they're like social doctors as far as enforcing the law. So make their jobs safer and actually easier, because you know that they aren't going to have to go around policing illegal drugs, because who's going to pay a fortune for some illegal drugs when they can buy some perfectly safe drugs from a licensed vendor? Is an educated society going to really abuse drugs as much? And also, and this is the point that I want to include here now, is when you've got a very high turnover of people going through the prison system, especially males, and especially males of the lower classes, you're going to have a very high percentage of brutalised males, who then are going to become fathers, husbands, boyfriends, you name it. They, what you're doing is you're keeping society brutalised, because as many people are going into prison every year, there's also lots of people coming out of prison who often end up more criminalised, more damaged than they already were before they went in, and then they're coming out of prison and back into society. And you're talking about mostly demoralised, impoverished, depressed people, people who lose it, who perhaps suffer from post-traumatic stress. It is really bad, because that is what I mean. This corruption at the core of the law itself. When the law itself is corrupt, when it's criminal, it is a corruption. Prohibition is a corruption. That's what it is. To tell people that, look, you are not allowed to eat this, and if you do, we're going to arrest you and put you in prison. We're going to come and terrorise your whole family. So, you know, there's one guy in a household that's dealing in drugs, illegal drugs. The police want to get that guy, but the whole family, including the children, are going to be terrorised by police breaking into the house, you know, like stormtroopers in the middle of the night or early hours of the morning. The children are going to be traumatised. So you're dealing with traumatised children who actually hate the police, they hate the brutality and violence. They don't understand about the drugs. Okay, this needs to end. It does need to end. And instead, all I'm seeing is largely politicians, both in Britain and America and in many other countries, talking about, we're going to crack down on drugs, we're going to clean up our streets. You're never going to clean your streets up. Your own top tiers of society are all on drugs. They're importing them. We know for a fact the CIA itself has been involved in importing drugs. Just recently there were some military people charged, convicted for dealing in illegal drugs. We're talking about high levels of corruption. We're also talking about the levels of blackmail that can then be held against politicians, anybody in power who's got an addiction, or they're somehow encouraged to have an addiction, and oh yeah, you're all right, here you go, there's your drugs, you keep doing what we tell you, you talk about this, you talk about the fact that there's lead in the water, or whatever thing that it is you know about that we want to keep secret from the public that is actually a risk to the public. We're going to shop you for drugs, or we've got this on you, we've got that on you. You know, child abuse and trafficking, human trafficking, especially women for prostitution. Drugs are very heavily, illegal drugs are very heavily relied on to entrap, especially young women and young men, and to control children for the sex industry. You see, this prohibition needs to end. It really, really does. And if anybody's really concerned about the impact of drugs on society, then first and foremost, instead of talking about cleaning up the city, which you're never going to clean it up because the city's filthy, it's corrupt to the core, you're not going to clean that up. Are you going to arrest all you dirty politicians, you drug addict politicians? I mean, one of Britain's newspapers sent reporters, the place was tested, the Houses of Parliament was tested for illegal drugs. Traces of them were everywhere, in every toilet, in every room. They found traces of illegal drugs, cocaine, you name it. They found traces in the Houses of Parliament. That's members of Parliament. I think they tested London's banknotes at one stage for drugs. They found 95% of London's banknotes were contaminated with cocaine. 95%. Now, that's not all the poorest people who actually have the least money and the least ability to buy the drugs and import them. Okay? The drugs aren't all coming in through Mexicans getting over the border where there's no fence, illegally entering the country. The drugs are coming in through legitimate means by people, organisations, organised crime syndicates that involve customs, police, intelligence, you name it. It's been a source of petty cash, and actually more than petty cash, and then you've got a host of businesses that are there, that are created, that literally do nothing. They're just there purely, really, to launder money. So the business isn't actually earning a profit. It is shown to earn a minimum profit in order to legitimise this money, that millions and millions of dollars that have been earned illegitimately. So they set up a shop somewhere, or I mean, it cannot go on. This insanity. It's insanity. You know. So it isn't the problem. I don't think that there's a problem of too many police. I think there's a problem with the what kind of people are accepted, what kind of psychologists are accepted to be police officers, because that kind of power and authority does attract certain mentalities. And so it attracts very righteous people, very caring people who really want to help society genuinely, but it also attracts megalomaniacs, power trippers, egotists, sadists even, and so therefore the people who are actually recruiting police officers need to make sure that they're not recruiting people who will abuse their position in order to satisfy their personal psychopathic or sadistic desires, you see. But I think that there could be more police, they could be much, much better paid, and also they don't have to serve corrupt laws that are fundamentally corrupting society itself. I think there should be no such thing as a corporate prison. The prisons should be state run, they need to be state run. And again, how much are prison guards paid? It's about time that people started paying people their due deserves, their due rights, according to the responsibility of the job that they have and the risks, okay? I mean, it can't be very nice spending all your day in a prison, most of your working life in a prison. That's your job, in a prison full of people who are ex-drug addicts or who are brutalised by the very system that actually enforces a brutal law. And it is precisely because of prohibition that the people in a lot of the South American countries are fleeing because of the drug wars that are going on out there, and the the drug gangs warfare, and people who get caught in the crossfire, and people who get dragged into it against their wishes because otherwise your mum's going to get a bullet through her head, and blah blah blah. I mean, it is just endless, endless, the amount of crime and criminals created through prohibition. And that's why anybody who talks about, oh, we've got to clean up the city, we're going to crack down on drugs, what you're saying is we are going to intensify the level of crime and criminals, and the very top ones are going to continue to get away with murder, and they're going to make a profit out of it in the process as well. And unless people can wake up to that, I've got no time for anybody that supports prohibition. I really haven't, because I just do not know how any rational, sane, compassionate, genuine human being can justify prohibition when we have witnessed for decade upon decade upon decade the slow degradation and ruin of society. And the very fact that these bankers have made so free and easy with people's pensions, saw people homeless on the streets. Well, of course, people high on cocaine can do that kind of thing. People high on bags of cocaine. Cocaine is actually a very psychopathic drug, and psychopaths are attracted to it. But it also helps people who do have a conscience. It helps them to keep their conscience at bay. And when you couple that with alcohol as well, because most of them, they don't just take the cocaine, do they? They like their alcohol as well. It just cannot go on. It really cannot go on, because there's going to be no society left. You are going to end up needing a total police state, and actually the only people who will be using cocaine are the very rich, and they'll just do it freely because they're the only ones that will be able to afford it. It's, what can I say? I'm disgusted at this world, I really am. Totally, totally disgusted, especially at the people who claim to be educated and claim to, oh, we know, we're the politicians, we're the ones in charge, we're going to make the world perfect. Every, we, we are the ones that need to be in control. We are the ones everybody should listen to. We're right, everybody else is wrong. No, no. Double the police's wages, root out police who are abusing their powers, who have psychological problems, help them, give them some therapy. You know, I'm not saying they should all be punished. Have an amnesty. Have an amnesty for the police in that sense. Forget the crimes. It's like, look, we're going to start from scratch. Everybody, this is it now. Your wages are up. Your pensions are upped. We're banning prohibition. Prohibition is going to be abolished. Okay, we're going to set up venues. We're going to tax these drugs, legitimate taxes that are going to serve society. They're going to pay for your national health care. I mean, when you look at all the billions, if not trillions, that are being spent on America in drugs, that alone could run the whole of the country's health service, education, social security, pensions, you name it. Okay? But instead, it's all going into criminals' pockets that are spending it on what? Diamond rings and gold necklaces and yachts and private jets and this and that. $1,000 pairs of shoes and ridiculous things. Ridiculous things that give nothing to society. A handbag that costs $5,000. It's it. This insanity cannot go on. It really cannot go on. The planet cannot support it. The planet cannot support it any longer. And huge, big love to Richard D. Wolff. Please listen to Richard D. Wolff. He is a man of intelligence, a man of integrity. What he shares is absolutely spot on. He is an elder. Respect him, respect his knowledge, respect his understanding, respect his guidance, America. Respect him. Donald Trump, in comparison to Donald Trump, Donald Trump's like a toddler in kindergarten when it comes to guidance and intelligence and lived experience and understanding of the real situation of people's lives right now. And these are the kind of people that need to be elected into power. The people who are making sense, the people who are speaking to you as human beings, who take everything into account, okay? And do think, America, about the kind of society, what prohibition has done to your society. You witnessed it with alcohol, and now it's come back 100 times worse with prohibition against narcotics, all the substances labelled narcotic. It's time to end it. It's time to establish a humane, caring, balanced society. And again, what can I say to Richard D. Wolff? Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to you for taking time to listen.